Fans.
So Bow Wow got bomb.
Yes.
So
have lost businesses because I don't bend over in that way. I don't compromise. I don't play roles. I don't kiss a man. I don't do that because the man card means everything.
Orlando Brown's words hit the internet like a meteor crashing into a quiet town. The former Disney star, infamous for his erratic behavior and wild claims, had just unleashed a torrent of allegations that set social media ablaze and left the entertainment world scrambling for answers. In a bizarre video clip, Brown rattled off the names of some of the biggest figures in music, claiming he'd shared intimate encounters with them. The list was as jaw-dropping as it was implausible: Drake, Usher, Bow Wow, and even Busta Rhymes and Diddy. The delivery was unhinged, punctuated by lip-licking gestures and cryptic phrases that bordered on gibberish. Yet, despite the absurdity, the video spread like wildfire. In an age where the line between conspiracy and truth is paper-thin, people couldn't look away.
He loved me while he loved me. And only I can, just like Diddy. The same thing with Diddy.
The reactions were immediate and polarizing. On one end, fans dismissed Brown's rant as another episode of his documented struggles, a symptom of deeper issues that needed urgent attention. "Somebody get this man help," one commenter wrote under the video, a sentiment echoed by many who saw his behavior as a cry for assistance rather than a credible expose. On the other end of the spectrum, some viewers connected the dots, or at least thought they did, and whispered about the possibility of hidden truths behind his chaotic delivery. After all, the entertainment industry has long been shrouded in whispers of scandals, secret lives, and power plays. Could there be something more to this? Could Brown be pulling back the curtain on a world few dare to acknowledge? The speculation turned the video into a viral sensation, but the fallout wasn't limited to Brown himself. The celebrities he named, especially Busta Rhymes and Diddy, suddenly found themselves under an intense and unwelcome spotlight.
So, Terrence Howard appeared on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David, and the episode, this premiered on April 4th, definitely making the rounds because in this episode, Terrence Howard describes an interaction with Diddy where he says that he believes that Diddy was trying to have with him. Let's take a look.
For Busta Rhymes, the timing couldn't have been worse. The rapper, long celebrated for his larger-than-life persona and rapid-fire lyrical prowess, had spent decades cultivating an image of unshakable confidence and machismo. But as the video gained traction, cracks began to form in that carefully constructed facade. Allegations started resurfacing, claims that had once been dismissed as tabloid fodder, but now felt uncomfortably relevant. It wasn't just Orlando Brown's video stirring the pot. A former bodyguard of Busta's, known only as Big Homie CeCe, had recently come forward with his own set of jaw-dropping accusations. According to the bodyguard, Busta had made unusual requests during their time together, requests that allegedly involved specific types of companions being brought into his private spaces. The bodyguard described these incidents as common knowledge among those in the rapper's inner circle, painting a picture of a man whose private life stood in stark contrast to his public image. These claims alone would have been enough to ignite a media frenzy, but the story didn't stop there. Busta's past behavior became the subject of renewed scrutiny, with old incidents being dragged back into the light. One particularly infamous episode involved a confrontation at a South Beach burger joint in the early hours of the morning. Witnesses claimed that Busta had thrown a tantrum after being asked to wait his turn in line, hurling insults that included homophobic slurs at the staff. The incident, which had been reported widely at the time, now took on a new dimension. Was this outburst simply the result of a bad night, or did it hint at deeper issues bubbling beneath the surface? As the internet dissected every detail, the narrative began to shift. What had once been dismissed as a one-off meltdown was now being re-examined as part of a larger pattern of behavior.
Bro, this is our world, you know?
Yeah.
We can do what we want with our money.
And then there was the nightclub incident, an event so charged with controversy that it seemed ripped straight from the pages of a scandalous tell-all. According to reports, Busta had been approached by a fan outside a Miami diner next to a popular LGBTQ+ hotspot. The fan, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash, tapped Busta on the shoulder to offer a compliment. What followed was a tirade so intense it left onlookers stunned. Busta reportedly yelled at the fan to back off, using language that many deemed offensive and hateful. Eyewitnesses claimed he turned to his bodyguards and muttered something under his breath, words that, if true, painted a troubling picture of his mindset. The incident quickly became a talking point, fueling debates about the intersection of celebrity power and prejudice. Was this another example of a star feeling untouchable, or was there something deeper at play?
We made love.
Who you made love with?
Diddy, Bow Wow, Busta Rhymes.
The controversy surrounding Busta Rhymes didn't exist in isolation. It was part of a broader conversation about the hidden lives of hip-hop's biggest names. For years, rumors had swirled about a secret subculture within the industry, a world where public personas of hypermasculinity clashed with private realities that were far more complex. Terrence Dean, a former MTV executive, had once written a memoir that peeled back the curtain on this hidden world. In his book, Dean described a thriving but secretive community of LGBTQ+ individuals within hip-hop, many of whom felt compelled to hide their true selves to maintain their careers. The book didn't name names, but it painted a vivid picture of an industry built on contradictions. On one hand, there was the celebration of individuality and self-expression. On the other, there was an unspoken rule that certain truths had to remain buried.
You know, there's a short life in
Why do you think that is with the creative side?
Well, because losing out money, you got to take you're going through so much to try and deal with life.
This backdrop made the allegations against Busta Rhymes even more compelling and more complicated. If the claims were true, they would expose not just the rapper but the hypocrisy of an entire industry. If they were false, they would still serve as a reminder of the precarious tightrope celebrities walk, where even unsubstantiated rumors can spiral into full-blown crises. Either way, the tension was palpable. Fans and critics alike were left grappling with the same question: what was real and what was fabrication? And more importantly, who was benefiting from the chaos? Diddy, meanwhile, found himself caught in a storm of his own making. As Orlando Brown's video circulated, it reignited long-standing rumors about the music mogul's private life. For years, Diddy had been the subject of speculation, with whispers of extravagant parties and questionable behavior following him like a shadow. Some of these stories had been dismissed as the price of fame, the inevitable gossip that surrounds any figure of his stature, but others had stuck, fueled by cryptic comments from those who claimed to have been on the inside. One particularly persistent rumor involved Diddy's so-called freak-offs, gatherings that allegedly blurred the line between indulgence and exploitation. These events, described in hushed tones by former associates, were said to be opulent, secretive, and deeply controversial. Now, with Orlando Brown's allegations bringing Diddy's name back into the spotlight, those old stories were gaining new traction.
What you know about his relationship with Diddy?
Well, when Stevie J first got his start with Diddy, you know what I'm saying, Diddy treated him just like he was treating everybody else. Robbing them blind, and they didn't even know it. Because they didn't know anything about the record industry.
The timing couldn't have been worse for Diddy, who was already facing a slew of legal challenges. From lawsuits alleging misconduct to accusations of using his influence to silence critics, the mogul's once untouchable empire seemed to be cracking under the weight of its own secrets. And yet, despite the mounting pressure, Diddy had remained largely silent on the matter. His public appearances were calculated, his statements carefully crafted to project confidence and control. But behind the scenes, insiders whispered of a man increasingly isolated, surrounded by a shrinking circle of loyalists. Was he simply waiting for the storm to pass? Or was he preparing for a battle that could reshape his legacy forever?
I mean, to each their own, and why would they not have when they're rappers?
The parallels between Busta Rhymes and Diddy were impossible to ignore. Both were larger-than-life figures, icons in their own right, and both now found themselves at the center of scandals that threatened to unravel everything they had built. The allegations against them weren't just personal, they were cultural, forcing the industry to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the price of fame. And as the public watched, dissected, and debated, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. The real story lay not in the headlines, but in the shadows, in the secrets these men had fought so hard to keep hidden. The question wasn't just what had happened, it was what would happen next.
You hear all these kind of stuff, whereas that him and Puff is in sexual relationships with other men.
And if you thought the rumors around Busta and Diddy had already hit their peak, you'd be completely mistaken. The rabbit hole kept going, and what it revealed wasn't just scandalous, it was grotesque. The so-called private gatherings that had been whispered about for years weren't just the stuff of wild industry rumors anymore. Insiders began spilling details that painted a disturbing picture of what went on behind closed doors. These weren't just parties, they were meticulously orchestrated spectacles, complete with dim lighting, strategically arranged furniture, and allegedly a set of unspoken rules that everyone in attendance was expected to follow. For those who were invited, it wasn't a choice to attend, it was a demand. And for many, It wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap. Accounts from staffers, former acquaintances, and even anonymous attendees began to surface, piecing together a blueprint of the rituals that, if true, would shatter any remaining illusions about the innocence of Hollywood's nightlife. One source, who had worked as part of the security detail for these events, described a scene that was as bizarre as it was unsettling. Guests were reportedly required to leave their phones at the door. Standard protocol for high-profile gatherings, sure, but the reasoning here seemed far darker. According to this insider, the absence of phones wasn't just about privacy, it was about control. No one, not even the most powerful celebrities in attendance, could document what was happening. That left the narrative and the power squarely in the hands of the host.
Yo, Diddy, you gave me the ooskash smash. You gave me the ooskash muaf, the smooth smash. Diddy. Yeah, son.
The events themselves, described by multiple sources as ritualistic, allegedly involved a hierarchy that dictated who got to mingle with whom, who was allowed into the innermost circles, and who was relegated to the periphery. For those considered special guests, the experience was said to become far more intimate and far less voluntary. One former attendee, speaking under the cloak of anonymity, recounted being ushered into a private room after being hand-picked by a member of the host's entourage. It wasn't a request, it was an expectation, and if compliance wasn't forthcoming, the implication was that one's career or even safety was on the line.
This is what Diddy like? This is what they saying he like? This has been going on throughout the years, and now you living with him? A man that you once said that you hated? You ain't effing with him? But now you loyal? Come on, bro.
The situation grew even darker with allegations that Diddy, in particular, had a long history of using these gatherings as leverage. Multiple sources claimed that aspiring artists, actors, and models were often invited under the guise of networking opportunities, only to find themselves in situations where compliance wasn't just encouraged, it was demanded. One source, close to the music industry, described Diddy as a master manipulator, someone who could make or break a career with a single call. He knew exactly how to dangle the carrot, promising the world, and if resistance was met, he'd take it all away just as fast.
That was all the people that went to the Puffy parties. That was all the people that did all those things thinking that there was never going to be a consequence for what they were doing. Got punked out and pimped out by some greater desire. You shouldn't have a greater desire than being a man. So I believe that's a big problem with a lot of the actors out there because they get fluid. And next thing you know, once you go fluid,
But it wasn't just about power. It was about control. Many who were allegedly caught in Diddy's web described a pattern of behavior that was as calculated as it was chilling. One former employee claimed that Diddy had an almost predatory instinct for identifying vulnerabilities. He'd figure out what made someone tick, what they wanted, what they feared, and he'd use it against them. If success was desired, he'd offer it. If the fear of losing everything was present, he'd threaten to take it. Either way, he always came out on top. Then there were the freak-offs, a term that had been whispered about in industry circles for years. It suddenly became a focal point of the growing allegations against Diddy, described as multi-day events that blurred the lines between indulgence and something far more sinister. These gatherings were said to involve carefully selected guests, detailed planning, and an unsettling level of coordination. One former associate claimed that these events were so elaborate they even had their own supply lists, everything from lighting equipment to specialized linens. It was like a production with no detail too small. Everything had to be perfect because these weren't just parties, they were performances.
Did you ever have the opportunity where you got invited and you said no to it?
Hell yeah.
What was the consequences when you said no?
Puffy invited me for weeks asking me to come and teach him how to, wanted me to be his acting coach for a while. Go there and he's sitting around just looking. I'm like, okay, what's the material you want to work on? He's just looking at me.
As for the aftermath, multiple sources described a chilling routine that allegedly followed these events. Those involved were reportedly provided with recovery services, including medical treatments to help them bounce back from the night's excesses. One former attendee described waking up in a luxury suite only to find a team of professionals waiting to administer IV fluids and other treatments. It was like they knew exactly what was needed before it was even asked. But it wasn't kindness, it was control. They wanted to make sure attendees were good enough to leave, but not good enough to talk. But the most disturbing part, the allegations that these events were documented, filmed, photographed, and archived by those in charge. Multiple sources claimed that the footage wasn't just for personal use, it was a form of insurance, a way to ensure that no one would ever speak out. One former employee described stumbling upon a collection of tapes and being told in no uncertain terms that their contents were off limits. It was like a library, they said, but instead of books, it was secrets. And if you were in one of those tapes, you knew you could never cross the line.
He noticed. He close to Puff at this time. So he know what's going on.
As if that wasn't enough, whispers began to circulate about the lengths to which Diddy allegedly went to protect his empire. Former associates described a pattern of intimidation, with threats that ranged from legal action to physical harm. One former bodyguard claimed that Diddy had a network of enforcers who were tasked with keeping everyone in line. If you even thought about going public, you'd get a visit, they said. And trust me, you didn't want that visit. And yet, despite all of this, Diddy's influence remained unshaken, at least for now. His connections, his wealth, and his reputation had shielded him from scrutiny for years. But as the allegations piled up, cracks began to form in the armor. Former allies started to distance themselves, brands quietly cut ties, and the whispers turned into a roar that couldn't be ignored. For the first time, it seemed, the king of bad boy entertainment was facing a challenge he couldn't simply buy his way out of.
Will you help me? I want to hear your music, so I come over there and I play the music. And he's sitting there, just looking at me, like waiting. Okay. So then my assistant was like, you know, he wants to hang out with you next week. And I was like, for what? He's like, I think he's trying to you. That's what my assistant said. And I was like, oh, okay. Now I get it. So now no more communication.
The same could be said for Busta Rhymes, whose own controversies were now being viewed through a new lens. Allegations that once seemed isolated now appeared to be part of a larger pattern, one that raised uncomfortable questions about the culture of secrecy that permeates the entertainment industry. Was this just the tip of the iceberg? And if so, how deep did it go? For every story that had been told, there were countless others that remained hidden, buried under layers of power, privilege, and fear. But here's the thing. The public isn't so easily silenced anymore. In an age of social media where every whisper can turn into a shout, the walls of secrecy are starting to crumble. And as more voices come forward, the question isn't just what happened, it's what happens next. Will these men finally be held accountable, or will the system protect them once again? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and trust us, you're going to want to stick around for the next chapter of this saga. It's far from over.